Welcome back, Wasteland Wanderers. Today we are diving into one of the most classified, most terrifying secrets the pre-war government ever buried. Installation Anubis-07, the Sphinx Bunker that was never supposed to exist, and the transformation project that might have saved humanity or might have destroyed it forever. This is a story about what happens when you play God with human genetics, when you bury your darkest experiments under the desert sand, and when the bombs fall before you can clean up your mistakes. Let the lore begin. They told me the Sphinx was just a statue, a relic from some old world casino that never got built, but I know what I saw beneath the Nevada sand, and I know why everyone who went in before me never came back. My name is Marcus Webb, former Defense Intelligence Agency field operative, and this is my confession about Installation Anubis-07, the facility that was never supposed to exist. It started 3 weeks before the bombs fell, October of 2077, and I was assigned to what my handler called a routine security sweep. Routine. That word should have been my first warning. Nothing the DIA did was ever routine. We were the ghosts of the old government, operating facilities that had no official record, running experiments that made Vault-Tec look like saints. The switchboard in Boston, Federal Surveillance Center K-21B in the glowing sea, these were just the tip of an iceberg that went deeper than anyone imagined. Installation Anubis was different though. It sat 40 miles northeast of what would become the Mojave Wasteland, buried under 300 feet of desert rock and concrete. From the surface, all you could see was the head, a massive sphinx carved from reinforced concrete and steel, its face turned toward the rising sun like the ancient monuments of Egypt. But this wasn't built by pharaohs. This was built by men who thought they were gods, and they filled it with secrets that were meant to stay buried forever. I remember the first time I saw it through my binoculars, shimmering in the desert heat like a mirage. The Sphinx head rose maybe 60 feet above the sand, weathered and cracked to look ancient, covered in hieroglyphics that weren't quite right, because scattered among the genuine Egyptian symbols were others, modern ones, encoded messages that only DIA personnel could read. They spelled out warnings, contamination protocols, automated defense systems active, and one phrase that made my blood run cold even in that 100-degree heat: no human presence authorized after October 10th, 2077. I was arriving on October 20th. My orders were simple: retrieve a data core from Sublevel 7, labeled Project Osiris, and get out before the automated lockdown sequence completed. They gave me 48 hours. They didn't tell me what Project Osiris was, or why the facility had been abandoned 2 weeks earlier, or why all 6 members of the previous retrieval team had their emergency beacons go silent within 3 hours of entry. I asked my handler once, just once. He looked at me with these dead eyes and said the only thing I needed to know was that Project Osiris contained research that could not fall into Chinese hands, and that I was expendable. Everyone who worked for the DIA was expendable. We knew that going in. The entrance was through the mouth. Of course it was. Some DIA architect with a sick sense of humor designed it so you had to walk between rows of concrete teeth, each one 8 feet tall and sharp as a blade. The throat of the Sphinx descended at a 45-degree angle, a tunnel lined with observation cameras that tracked my every movement. I could hear them whirring in the darkness, their lenses adjusting, focusing. Even abandoned, the facility was watching. 50 feet down, the tunnel opened into what they called the Pharaoh's Chamber, a circular room, maybe 30 feet across, its walls covered floor to ceiling with more of those false hieroglyphics. But these ones were different. These ones moved. It took me a minute to realize what I was seeing. The walls weren't stone at all. They were screens, thousands of tiny displays arranged to look like carved symbols, and they were cycling through data at a speed no human could read. Personnel files, experiment logs, casualty reports, all scrolling past in an endless stream of classified information. In the center of the room sat a terminal, one of those old Robco units with a green phosphor display. It was still active, still waiting for someone to log in. Next to it was a skeleton in a Diafield uniform, slumped over the keyboard, one bony hand still resting on the keys. His ID badge said, Jackson Theodore. Security clearance Omega Black. Date of death October 11th, 2077. One day after the facility evacuation, I checked his body for wounds. Nothing. No burns, no trauma, no sign of violence. His Geiger counter was clipped to his belt, reading normal background radiation. His pistol was still in its holster, all 15 rounds accounted for. Theodore Jackson had died without firing a shot, without any external cause that I could identify. The only unusual thing was his expression. His jaw was locked open in a scream that never made it past his lips, and his empty eye sockets seemed to be staring at something above the terminal. I looked up. The ceiling was wrong. It should have been solid concrete, but instead it was covered in what looked like organic growth, black tendrils spreading out from a central point, pulsing with a faint bioluminescence that cast the whole room in a sickly green glow. I recognized it immediately from my training briefings. Forced evolutionary virus contamination, strain unknown. Installation. Anubis wasn't just a data storage facility, it was a biological warfare research site. The terminal booted up with a single phrase on the screen, Welcome to Project Osiris. Please enter. Authorization code. I pulled out the code cylinder my handler had given me, a small metal tube filled with punch cards. When I inserted it, the terminal beeped 3 times and the wall displays all stopped scrolling at once. They showed a single image now, a schematic of the facility, 7 levels descending into the earth, each one color-coded by threat level. Levels 1 through 3 were green, safe for human access. Levels 4 and 5 were yellow, caution advised. Levels 6 and 7 were red, with a notation I had to read twice to believe automated defense systems active. Biological containment compromised. Estimated hostile entities 47. Expected survivor count 0. I needed to reach sublevel 7. The first trap almost killed me before I made it to level 2. The corridor from the Pharaoh's chamber looked clear, just a straight shot about 50 yards long with doors on either side. But when I reached the halfway point, I heard a click beneath my boot. Pressure plate. I had maybe half a second before the walls on both sides erupted with machine gun fire. I dropped flat and crawled, feeling rounds passing inches above my back, hearing them ricochet off the concrete in a deafening cacophony. The barrels were hidden behind panels in the walls, dozens of them, creating a crossfire that would shred anything standing upright. It lasted 15 seconds. When the guns finally went silent, I counted over 300 spent casings scattered across the floor. I also counted 7 more skeletons, the remains of the previous retrieval team, their armor and gear torn to pieces by sustained automatic fire. One of them had made it almost to the door at the corridor's end. Almost. His hand was stretched out toward the access panel, fingers still curled as if trying to punch in the entry code. The panel itself was riddled with bullet holes, its screen dark and dead. I had to backtrack and find another route. The doors along the corridor were sealed, but one of them had a ventilation grate near the floor. It took me 20 minutes to pry it open with my combat knife, cutting my hands on the sharp edges, but eventually I squeezed through into a room that made me question everything I thought I knew about the old government. It was a laboratory, but not like any lab I'd seen before. The equipment was advanced, too advanced. Machines that looked like they belonged in a science fiction magazine, humming with power even after all these years. Banks of cryogenic storage units lined one wall, their displays showing stable stasis fields containing vials of something that glowed with that same sickly green as the ceiling growth. And in the center of the room, suspended in a clear cylinder filled with amber fluid, was something that might have once been human. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, with elongated limbs and a skull that had been somehow reshaped into something angular and alien. Its skin had a golden sheen to it, covered in what looked like hieroglyphics, but these ones were carved into the flesh itself. The eyes were open, staring at nothing, and I swear when I looked at it, those eyes moved. Just a fraction, just enough to track me as I walked past. A placard beneath the cylinder read, Subject Osiris Prime, Gene Modification Trial 43, Pan-Immunity Virion Derivative 17, Cognitive Enhancement Package Achieved, Physical Transformation 92% complete, Status Viable. Then, in smaller text at the bottom, Do not terminate. Presidential authorization required. Presidential. This thing had been important enough that the President of the United States had personally ordered it kept alive. I tried to imagine what kind of experiments would require that level of oversight. What kind of results would justify turning a human being into whatever this golden horror was supposed to be. The DIA had always pushed the boundaries of ethical research, but this was something else entirely. The walls of the lab were covered in research notes, scrawled in a dozen different hands, overlapping and contradicting each other. Some talked about creating super soldiers immune to radiation and biological weapons. Others mentioned enhanced intelligence, telepathic communication, extended lifespan. One note, written in shaky handwriting, simply said, They promised us immortality. They gave us monsters. We deserve what is coming. I found the next access corridor behind a false wall panel. It led down to level 3, a maze of administrative offices and storage rooms. This level seemed abandoned in a hurry. Coffee cups still sat on desks, their contents long since evaporated into brown stains. Computer terminals were left running, their screens frozen on whatever documents had been displayed when everyone fled. Personnel files mostly. Scientists, engineers, security staff. I recognized some of the names from other DIA projects, people who had expertise in virology, genetics, exotic materials research. One file stood out, Dr. Amelia Hart, lead researcher on the Anubis project. Her photo showed a woman in her 40s, professional, confident. Her credentials were impressive, multiple doctorates, papers published in classified journals, security clearances that went all the way to the top, but someone had written a note across her file in red ink, terminated October 9th, 2077. Reason unauthorized contact with foreign intelligence, method Sphinx protocol. I didn't know what Sphinx protocol meant, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. The elevator to level 4 was still functional, though the interior was covered in scratches, deep gouges in the metal walls like something with claws had tried to tear its way out. The control panel sparked when I pressed the button, and the descent was anything but smooth. The car lurched and shuddered, its cables groaning under stress they weren't designed to handle after years of neglect. When the doors finally opened, I stepped out into hell. Level 4 was where they kept the failures, row after row of containment cells, each one maybe 8 by 8, each one holding the remains of something that had once been human. Some of the subjects had died quickly, their bodies twisted and broken by genetic modification that went wrong. Others had lived longer. You could tell by the scratch marks on the inside of the glass, the dried blood smeared across the walls. A few cells still had living occupants. They stared at me with eyes that held too much intelligence, too much understanding of what had been done to them. One subject, labeled Osiris 27, had been modified to have enhanced strength. Its muscles had grown so large they had torn through the skin, exposing raw tissue that refused to heal. It could barely move, but when it saw me, it started slamming itself against the reinforced glass of its cell, over and over, leaving cracks and smears of fluid. Another, Osiris 33, had been given the ability to survive in high radiation environments. Its skin had taken on a metallic sheen, its hair had fallen out, and it had developed these bony protrusions all over its body that looked like natural armor. But the radiation resistance had come at a cost. It was blind, its eyes having been replaced by smooth skin, and it could only navigate by sound. When I walked past its cell, it turned its head to follow me, tapping on the glass with one elongated finger as if asking to be let out. The observation logs for each cell were still accessible through terminals mounted beside the doors. I made the mistake of reading a few. Subject exhibits extreme aggression toward research staff. Recommend increased sedation. Subject 17 attempted self-termination via starvation. Force-feeding protocols implemented. Subject 41 demonstrating telepathic abilities but unable to control mental broadcasts. Staff experiencing severe psychological distress when in proximity. Subject terminated. At the end of the cell block was a larger containment chamber, and this one had been breached. The door was torn off its hinges, lying on the floor 20 feet away. Inside, I could see the remains of restraints, heavy-duty straps designed to hold something far stronger than human. They had all been snapped like thread. Whatever had been in this cell was loose, somewhere in the facility. The cell designation was Osiris-1, the first successful subject, and according to the last log entry, it had broken containment on October 10th, approximately 8 hours after facility evacuation began. If you're still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button, because what I found on the lower levels is going to change everything you thought you knew about what the government was really doing before the bombs dropped. I stood there for a long moment, staring at that empty containment chamber, trying to calculate my odds. Osiris-1 had been loose in the facility for 10 days. Before I arrived, 10 days to explore 7 levels of underground corridors, 10 days to learn every passage, every hiding place, 10 days to evolve into something even more dangerous than the scientists who created it. The terminal beside the breached cell still functioned, and against my better judgment, I accessed the subject file. What I read made me understand why the DIA had evacuated Installation Anubis, why they had sealed it with automated defenses set to kill, why my retrieval mission was considered expendable. Subject: Osiris-1 was Dr. Amelia Hart. The lead researcher had used herself as the first test subject. According to her personal logs, she had been dying of cancer, aggressive and inoperable. Rather than accept her fate, she volunteered for the gene modification trials, using a cocktail of pan-immunity virion derivatives and something else, something the logs called compound nephthys. The treatment worked beyond all expectations. Her cancer was eradicated within 72 hours. Her cellular degradation reversed. Her body began producing regenerative enzymes at an accelerated rate. But there were side effects: extreme photosensitivity requiring total darkness, drastically increased metabolism demanding constant nutrition, enhanced sensory perception causing severe psychological stress, and most concerning, aggressive territorial behavior and hostility toward unmodified humans. The last entry in her log was dated October 9th, written in handwriting that degraded from professional script to barely legible scratches. They want to terminate me, classified me as a failed experiment, but I am not a failure. I am the future. I am what humanity must become to survive what is coming. They cannot understand. They are still thinking with old world minds, trapped in flesh that will burn when the missiles fall. I will not let them destroy me. I will not let them destroy the work. Project Osiris will continue, with or without their authorization. The next day, she had killed 3 security guards and escaped her containment cell. I needed to move faster. Every minute I spent reading files was another minute for Osiris-1 to find me, and I had no illusions about my chances in a direct confrontation. The woman had been enhanced to survive nuclear war. My DIA combat training wasn't going to mean much against something that could regenerate from bullet wounds and see in complete darkness. The descent to level 5 required bypassing another trap system. This one was more sophisticated than the machine gun corridor. The stairwell looked normal at first glance, just concrete steps leading down into shadow. But when I shone my flashlight on them, I noticed the edges were too perfect, too uniform. Pressure sensors. Step on the wrong stair and the whole stairwell would fill with incendiary gel, turning the entire passage into a crematorium in seconds. I found the control panel hidden behind a service panel in the wall. It was a simple enough system once you understood the pattern. Every third step was safe, the others were armed. I descended slowly, carefully, counting each step. 1, 2, safe. 1, 2, safe. The stairs creaked beneath my weight, ancient concrete settling after years of neglect. Somewhere below me, I heard water dripping, a steady rhythm that echoed up through the darkness. Level 5 was flooded, not completely, but enough that I was wading through ankle-deep water that had seeped in from somewhere, pooling in the lowest sections of the facility. The water was cold and had this chemical smell to it, sharp and medicinal. When I tested it with my Geiger counter, the needle jumped into the yellow zone. Not immediately lethal, but prolonged exposure would be a problem. The walls down here were different. Instead of concrete, they were lined with lead panels, each one marked with radiation trefoil symbols and warnings in multiple languages: English, Chinese, Russian. This level had been designed for international access, which meant whatever research was conducted here had been sanctioned at the highest levels of multiple governments. A joint project, hidden from the public, buried under the desert where no one would ever find it. I found the research wing through a set of blast doors that had been forced open from the inside. The metal was bent outward, showing incredible strength, more evidence of Osiris-1 passing through. The wing beyond was a maze of laboratories, each one dedicated to a different aspect of the modification project. One lab focused on neural enhancement. Rows of preserved brains floated in tanks of clear fluid, their surfaces covered in metallic implants that looked like circuit boards grown directly into the tissue. Information placards described attempts to increase intelligence, enhance memory, enable direct mental interface with computer systems. Success rate 12%. Viable subjects 2. Current status terminated due to catastrophic psychological breakdown. Another lab was devoted to physical augmentation. Surgical equipment lay scattered across examination tables, stained with fluids I didn't want to identify. Charts on the walls showed human anatomy with proposed modifications marked in red. Reinforced skeletal structure using titanium alloys, muscle tissue replacement with synthetic fibers, organ redundancy for improved survivability. The notes mentioned test subjects, hundreds of them, all failed attempts before Osiris-1 achieved stable modification. The third lab stopped me cold. It was larger than the others, its walls covered floor to ceiling with photographs. Test subjects, every one of them, men, women, some who looked barely old enough to be out of high school. All of them wearing the same orange jumpsuit marked with a Vault-Tec logo and a number. Vault 96. The DIA had been using Vault dwellers as test subjects. I knew about Vault-Tec's experiments. Every field operative did. The vaults weren't shelters. They were laboratories where the Enclave and their corporate partners tested human responses to controlled scenarios. But I had always assumed the experiments were sociological, psychological, isolation studies, social engineering. I never imagined they were using vault populations for biological weapons research. According to the logs I found, Vault 96 had been designed to test experimental cryogenics and suspended animation. But the DIA had gained access to the vault through their partnership with Vault-Tec, using the sleepers as a supply of uncontaminated human subjects for Project Osiris. They would wake one subject at a time, tell them they were being transferred to a medical facility for evaluation, then bring them to Installation Anubis for genetic modification trials. None of them ever went back to the vault. The photographs showed the progression of each experiment, before images of healthy, normal humans, after images of things that barely qualified as alive. The researchers had been meticulous in their documentation, photographing every stage of the transformation, every mutation, every failure. I counted over 200 individual subjects across the walls, 200 people who had gone to sleep thinking they would wake up in a better world, only to end up as raw material for the DIA's vision of human evolution. One photograph caught my attention. A young woman, maybe 25, with dark hair and a defiant expression even in her vault suit. The caption beneath read, Subject Osiris 44, Vault 96 resident, retrieved October 1st, 2077, status modification in progress, compound Nephthys administered at elevated dosage, results pending, October 1st, 3 weeks before the bombs fell. This woman might have been one of the last subjects processed before the facility evacuation. I wondered if she was still alive somewhere in these corridors, transformed into something inhuman, trapped in a body she never asked for. The door to level 6 was sealed with a biometric lock that required both a keycard and a retinal scan. I found the keycard on another skeleton in a Dia uniform, this one slumped against the wall with a bullet hole through the skull. Self-inflicted, judging by the pistol still clutched in its hand and the spray pattern on the wall behind. The ID badge identified him as Dr. Chen, senior researcher. His personal effects included a small photograph of a woman and 2 children, their faces smiling at a camera in some moment of pre-war happiness. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "They told us we were saving humanity. They lied." The retinal scan was trickier. The system was still active, still waiting for authorized personnel. I tried using Dr. Chen's body, positioning the head in front of the scanner, but the tissue had degraded too much. The scanner rejected it with a harsh beep and a warning, deceased personnel detected. Access denied. Security alert. Triggered. Somewhere in the facility, alarms began to wail. I had maybe 30 seconds before automated defenses activated. I ran back to the laboratory, grabbed one of the preservation tanks containing a brain with intact optic nerves, and hauled it back to the door. The tank was heavy, sloshing with fluid, and I nearly dropped it twice. When I positioned it in front of the scanner, holding it at the right angle so the preserved eye could be read, I prayed to whatever was listening that the system would be stupid enough to fall for it. The scanner beeped. Processing. Then identity confirmed. Dr. Amelia Hart. Access granted. The door hissed open, revealing a corridor that descended at a sharp angle into darkness deeper than my flashlight could penetrate. The air that rushed out was cold and carried a smell like ozone mixed with something organic and wrong. From somewhere far below, I heard a sound that might have been machinery or might have been something breathing in long, slow cycles. Level 6 was where they kept the real secrets. The walls here were bare concrete, unfinished, like the construction crews had abandoned the work halfway through. Cables hung from the ceiling in loose tangles, still carrying power to systems that hummed and clicked in the darkness. The floor was covered in debris, broken equipment, shattered glass, and other things I tried not to look at too closely. The first chamber I entered was a command center of some kind. Banks of monitors displayed security feeds from across the facility, most of them showing static or empty corridors, but a few were still active, still watching. I saw Level 2 with its machine gun traps reset and armed. Level 3 with its administrative offices frozen in time. Level 4 with its containment cells, some still occupied by things that moved when they sensed the camera's attention. And on one monitor, I saw Level 7, the data core room where my objective waited. It was a circular chamber with a single pedestal in the center, and on that pedestal sat a metallic sphere about the size of a basketball. Project Osiris. All the research, all the test results, all the data from hundreds of experiments compressed into one portable storage device. But I also saw something else on that monitor. Movement in the shadows at the edge of the frame. Something large, something that moved with an unnatural grace, circling the pedestal like a predator guarding its kill. As I watched, it stepped into the light of the security camera, and I got my first clear look at what Dr. Amelia Hart had become. She was beautiful in the way a work of art is beautiful, terrible and awe-inspiring in equal measure. Her skin had that same golden sheen as the subject I had seen suspended in the lab on Level 2, covered in hieroglyphics that seemed to shift and flow across her body like living tattoos. She was taller now, maybe 6.5 feet, with proportions that were almost but not quite human, eyes glowed with a faint bioluminescence, and when she looked directly at the camera, I felt like she could see through it, see me watching her from 3 levels up. Then, she smiled, and I saw that her teeth had been replaced by something sharp and metallic. She raised one hand to the camera, her fingers elongated and tipped with claws, and she mouthed 4 words that I could read clearly, even without sound. "I have been waiting." The monitor went dark. All of them did, simultaneously, plunging the command center into complete darkness. My flashlight seemed pathetically inadequate against the sudden void, and in that darkness, I heard the ventilation system activate, pumping something into the air that made my gas mask's filters start to clog immediately. I had to move, had to get to level 7, retrieve the data core, and get out before whatever gas was flooding the facility incapacitated me. But as I stumbled toward the exit, feeling my way along the wall, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The ventilation system had been manually activated. Someone had thrown the switch. Someone who knew exactly where I was and exactly how to trap me. Installation Anubis wasn't abandoned. It was occupied. And Osiris-1 had been preparing for my arrival, setting the stage for whatever came next. If this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. Because what happened when I finally reached that data core room, what I learned about what the government was really planning for humanity's future, that is when everything I thought I knew about the old world came crashing down. I made it to the emergency air supply station near the stairwell to level 7. My lungs were burning, my vision tunneling as whatever chemical agent Osiris-1 had released into the ventilation system overwhelmed my mask's filters. The station was a metal cabinet bolted to the wall, its door marked with faded safety instructions from before the war. Inside were 3 rebreather units and a cache of oxygen canisters. 2 of the rebreathers had been smashed, their components scattered across the cabinet floor. The 3rd worked, barely. I strapped it on with shaking hands, feeling the blessed rush of clean air into my lungs. As my head cleared, I noticed something written on the inside of the cabinet door in what looked like dried blood. "Turn back. She knows what you came for. She will not let you leave." The handwriting matched the style from Dr. Chen's research notes. He must have made it this far before whatever happened to him in that corridor above. I wondered how long he had survived down here, trying to complete his own retrieval mission, before he decided that a bullet was preferable to whatever fate Osiris-1 had planned. The stairwell to level 7 was the most elaborate trap yet. Each step was rigged with pressure sensors, but unlike the simple pattern from before, these were randomized. There was no safe path. The only way down was to trigger the defenses and survive them. I studied the setup for 10 minutes, identifying the threat systems: flame jets hidden in the walls, flechette launchers in the ceiling, electrified rails along the handrails, and at the bottom, a pool of something that bubbled and steamed, releasing vapors that made the air shimmer. I had 3 frag grenades left in my pack. I pulled the pins on 2 of them and tossed them down the stairwell, then turned and ran back up the corridor as fast as I could. The explosions were deafening in the confined space, a double thunderclap that shook dust from the ceiling and made my ears ring. When I returned to the stairwell, I found that the blasts had triggered most of the defenses prematurely. The walls were scorched black from flame jets that had exhausted their fuel. The flechette launchers hung empty, their deadly payloads embedded in the opposite wall. The electrified rails sparked and died as their power cells overloaded. The pool at the bottom was still there, but the grenades had cracked the containment vessel. The liquid was draining away through fissures in the concrete, revealing a metal grating underneath. I descended carefully, testing each step before committing my weight. When I reached the bottom, I saw what the pool had been protecting. A door, massive, vault-rated, the kind of barrier designed to survive a direct nuclear strike. It was sealed with a wheel lock that would require industrial equipment to force, but someone had already been here. The wheel had been turned, the door opened just wide enough for a person to slip through. Fresh scratches in the metal showed where something with claws had gripped the edge and pulled. Beyond the door was level 7, and it was nothing like the levels above. This wasn't a research facility. This was a temple. The walls were covered in genuine Egyptian hieroglyphics, not the false ones from the upper levels. They told a story in images thousands of years old, a story about gods who came from the sky, who taught humanity the secrets of immortality, who promised to return when the world ended in fire. And beneath those ancient symbols, someone had added modern translations in English. They described the pan-immunity virion not as a human invention, but as a rediscovery of something older, something the pharaohs had used to extend their lives beyond natural limits. The corridor opened into a chamber that took my breath away. It was enormous, maybe 100 feet across and twice that tall, carved from solid bedrock with a precision that shouldn't have been possible with pre-war technology. The ceiling was painted to look like the night sky, complete with stars that glowed with some kind of phosphorescent paint. And in the center of the room, rising like an island from the floor, was a pyramid. Not a full pyramid, just the top section maybe, 30 feet tall, made from polished black stone that reflected the starlight ceiling like still water. Steps led up one side to a platform at the apex, and on that platform sat the data core. Project Osiris, my mission objective, the thing thousands of people had died to create. But I wasn't alone in the chamber. Dr. Amelia Hart stood at the base of the pyramid, one hand resting on the stone as if she could feel something through it. She was exactly as I had seen her on the security monitor, but more so. The golden skin, the hieroglyphic tattoos, the eyes that glowed like embers in shadow. She wore the tattered remains of a lab coat over what looked like golden armor grown directly from her flesh. When she turned to face me, I saw that she was smiling. "Marcus Webb," she said, and her voice was wrong. It had harmonics to it, layers of sound that shouldn't have been possible from a human throat. Field operative, Defense Intelligence Agency, born March 15, 2042 in Denver. Parents deceased in the Denver riots of '73. Recruited at age 19. 37 confirmed kills. Specialty, black site infiltration and data recovery. You are exactly who they said they would send. How do you know my name? I kept my hand near my holstered pistol, though I knew it would be useless against her. I know everything the DIA knows. She gestured around the chamber. This facility is connected to the switchboard in Boston, to Federal Surveillance Center K-21B, to every black site and classified database in the network. When they activated your mission parameters, I read the briefing before you did. I have been waiting for you, Marcus, waiting to show you what Project Osiris really is. She started climbing the pyramid steps, moving with that unnatural grace I had seen on the monitor. I followed, keeping my distance, trying to calculate whether I could grab the data core and run before she could stop me. She seemed to sense my thoughts. "You are wondering if you can complete your mission," she said without looking back. "You are wondering if your training and equipment give you an advantage. They do not. I can hear your heartbeat from here, smell the fear sweat on your skin, see the heat signature of your body through 3 inches of stone. I am what humanity needs to become, Marcus. I am the prototype for our species' survival." We reached the top of the pyramid. The data core sat on a pedestal of the same black stone, humming with power, surrounded by holographic displays that showed streams of genetic data flowing past too fast to read. Amelia reached out and touched one of the displays, and it froze on a particular sequence. "Do you know what the government discovered in 1962?" she asked, "when they excavated the tomb of King Tutankhamun and brought his mummy back to study in their secret laboratories?" I didn't answer. I didn't want to know. "They found viable genetic material," she continued, "preserved for over 3,000 years in conditions that should have degraded it completely. But it hadn't degraded. It had been modified, enhanced with compounds that stabilized the DNA and prevented cellular breakdown. The pharaohs had discovered immortality, Marcus, not through magic or divine intervention, but through genetic engineering. And when we analyzed those compounds, we found the basis for what would become the Pan-Immunity Virion project. The holographic display shifted, showing the molecular structure of the virus. It looked almost organic itself, with components that seemed to move and adapt as I watched. The government wanted super soldiers, Amelia said. They wanted troops who could survive nuclear war, biological weapons, who could operate in environments that would kill normal humans. But they were thinking too small. What I discovered, what Project Osiris proved, is that the modifications can do more than that. They can elevate human consciousness, enhance intelligence beyond current limits, enable abilities that most people would call supernatural. She turned to face me, and I saw tears running down her golden cheeks. Real tears, human tears, from eyes that glowed with inhuman light. I was dying, Marcus. Cancer eating through my body, months to live at best. And I looked at all this research, all these failed experiments, all these people who had died trying to achieve what the pharaohs accomplished millennia ago. And I realized the failures weren't because the science was wrong. They failed because the subjects weren't ready. Their bodies couldn't handle the transformation. But I was different. I was already dying. I had nothing left to lose. So you experimented on yourself, I said. I saved myself, she corrected. And in the process, I proved that Project Osiris works. The cancer is gone. My cellular regeneration is operating at levels that make me functionally immortal. My cognitive abilities have expanded to the point where I can process information faster than any computer the DIA owns. And I can feel it, Marcus. I can feel humanity's potential, what we could become if we would just accept the transformation. She picked up the data core, cradling it like something precious. This contains everything, every experiment, every result, every formula and procedure we developed. With this data, the transformation could be replicated, perfected, made available to everyone. Humanity could survive what is coming. The bombs, the radiation, the collapse of civilization. We could adapt, we could evolve, we could become like the gods our ancestors worshipped. The DIA will never allow that, I said. If they wanted this technology released, they wouldn't have sent me to retrieve it. They would have used it themselves. Oh, they tried, Amelia laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the chamber. Do you think you are the first person they sent? The previous retrieval teams, the security forces, the researchers who stayed behind, I gave them all a choice. Accept the transformation and help me perfect it or die trying to stop me. Most chose death. The old world programming runs deep. They would rather destroy something miraculous than accept that humanity could be more than it is. She held out the data core toward me. I am giving you the same choice, Marcus Webb. Take the data back to your handlers, and they will lock it away in some vault where it will never be used, where it will gather dust while humanity burns in nuclear fire and tears itself apart fighting over scraps. Or stay here with me. Accept the transformation. Help me prepare for what comes after the bombs fall. Help me save our species. I thought about the photographs in the laboratory above. The vault dwellers who had been used as test subjects, the failures, the mutations, the screaming faces frozen in their final moments. I thought about the 12% success rate, the catastrophic psychological breakdowns, the things that had been human and were now trapped in cells on level 4. How many of those vault dwellers died to perfect your treatment? I asked. Her expression didn't change. 217. But their sacrifice made the success possible, made me possible. In the calculus of survival, that is an acceptable cost, and if I refuse your offer, then you will be number 218, she said simply. I cannot let you take this data back to people who would destroy it. Project Osiris must survive, Marcus, even if I have to bury you down here with all the others who chose extinction over evolution. I want you to think about something. If you were in my position, standing in that chamber with a woman who had transcended humanity offering you immortality, would you take it? Would you accept the transformation knowing it might drive you insane, might turn you into something that would horrify everyone you ever knew? Or would you choose to stay human, stay mortal, knowing that nuclear war was coming and you had maybe weeks left to live as yourself? The choice felt impossible, but I had made my decision before I ever entered Installation Anubis. I had made it when I joined the DIA, when I accepted that my life was expendable in service to something larger than myself. Right or wrong, ethical or monstrous, the old world government was still the government, and I was still its servant. I drew my pistol. Amelia moved faster than I could track. One moment she was standing 3 feet away, the next she was behind me, one hand gripping my wrist with enough force to crack bone. The pistol clattered to the stone floor. She spun me around to face her, and I saw genuine sadness in those glowing eyes. "I am sorry," she said. "I had hoped you would choose differently, but I understand. The old world dies hard." She touched my forehead with one golden finger, and everything went white. When I woke up, I was in a containment cell on level 4, the same kind of cell I had seen earlier, 8 by 8, reinforced glass walls, observation terminal mounted beside the door. But this one was different. This one had been cleaned recently. The walls were pristine white, the floor polished. Someone had even left a cot in the corner with clean sheets and a pillow, like they expected me to be comfortable during what came next. My wrist throbbed where Amelia had grabbed me. I could see the bruises forming, 5 perfect finger marks in purple and black. But that wasn't what terrified me. What terrified me was the Ive line running into my left arm, connected to a bag of fluid that glowed with that same sickly green I had seen throughout the facility. Compound Nephthys, the transformation serum, and the bag was half empty. I tore the Ive out, not caring about the pain or the blood. But I knew it was too late. Whatever dose she had given me was already in my system, already working its way through my cells, already beginning the process that had turned Dr. Amelia Hart into something beyond human. I had maybe 48 hours before the changes became irreversible. The observation terminal activated on its own, and Amelia's face appeared on the screen. She wasn't in the chamber anymore. She was somewhere else in the facility, somewhere with better lighting. I could see the details of her transformation more clearly now. The way the hieroglyphics on her skin pulsed with faint bioluminescence, the way her eyes reflected light like a cat's, the way she moved with an economy of motion that suggested perfect control over every muscle. "You are awake," she said. "Good. The sedative I administered was calculated for your body weight, but individual reactions vary. How do you feel?" "You had no right," I said, and my voice came out as a rasp. My throat felt raw, like I had been screaming. "I had every right," she replied calmly. "You came here to steal the culmination of my life's work. You came armed and prepared to kill me if necessary. I simply made a different choice than the one you would have made. I chose to save you instead of destroying you. This isn't saving. This is making me into a monster." "Is it?" She tilted her head, studying me through the camera. "In 72 hours, Marcus, the world is going to end. The Chinese and Americans have been dancing around mutually assured destruction for years, and the music is about to stop. When those bombs fall, when the radiation floods the surface, when civilization collapses and humanity tears itself apart, fighting over the scraps, what will you be? A corpse buried under rubble? A ghoul, your mind slowly degrading as the radiation eats away at your brain? Or will you be something that can survive? Something that can thrive in the wasteland the old world is about to create? How do you know the bombs are coming?" I demanded. "How do you know it will be 72 hours? She smiled, and it wasn't entirely kind. "Because I have access to every classified database in the DIA network, Marcus. I have read the intelligence reports your superiors have been hiding from the public. The Chinese ghost fleet is real. Their stealth submarines are currently in position off the coast of California. The launch codes have already been distributed, and the Pentagon has calculated that the probability of nuclear war beginning in the next 3 days is 97.4%. They know it is coming. They have known for weeks. That is why they evacuated this facility. That is why they sent you on what was always meant to be a suicide mission. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. They knew I wouldn't make it out. Of course they knew. You were never meant to retrieve the data core, Marcus. You were meant to verify that I had destroyed it. And if I had not, you were meant to die trying, ensuring that no one else would come looking. The Dia is tying up loose ends before the world burns. Installation Anubis is one of those loose ends. You are another. The terminal screen split, showing multiple camera feeds from across the facility. I saw the levels above, the traps reset and armed, the corridors empty and waiting, and on one feed, I saw the surface entrance, the mouth of the Sphinx. There were vehicles approaching, military trucks, maybe a dozen of them, carrying what looked like demolition equipment. They are going to bury it, Amelia said. Seal the entrance with explosives, collapse the upper levels, ensure that Installation Anubis and everything in it is buried so deep that no one will ever find it. They will arrive in approximately 6 hours, which means we have 6 hours to finish your transformation and escape through the emergency exit on sublevel 7. I don't want this, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I could feel something changing. My senses were sharpening. I could hear the electrical hum of the lights with perfect clarity. I could smell the recycled air moving through the ventilation system, trace its path back to the scrubbers on level 2. And when I looked at my hands, I could see the faint golden shimmer beginning beneath the skin. What you want is irrelevant, Amelia said gently. What you need is to survive, and I am offering you that chance. The transformation is already beginning. You can fight it. Let the conflict between your original genetics and the modified genes tear you apart from the inside. Or you can accept it, guide it, become something magnificent. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. I was terrified too, Marcus. When I first felt the changes beginning, when I saw what I was becoming in the mirror, I wanted to stop it. I wanted to go back to being human, to being normal, to being mortal and limited and safe. But there is no going back. There is only forward, only evolution, only adaptation to a world that will not forgive weakness. The terminal went dark, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the subtle but unmistakable sensation of my body changing at the cellular level. I spent the next hour trying to find a way out of the containment cell. The glass was reinforced, probably bulletproof. The door was magnetically sealed, requiring either a keycard or a manual override from the terminal outside. The ventilation grate was too small for a person to fit through, and even if I could have squeezed in, it would just lead me deeper into the facility's ductwork. I was trapped, and every minute that passed made the transformation more complete. My skin started to change color first. The golden shimmer I had seen earlier spread from my hands up my arms, across my chest. It didn't hurt exactly, but it felt wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. The hieroglyphics appeared next, forming in patterns I didn't recognize, symbols that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves when I wasn't looking directly at them. Then came the pain. It started in my bones, a deep ache that rapidly escalated into agony as my skeletal structure began to reinforce itself. I felt my ribs thickening, my spine straightening, my skull reshaping in subtle ways that would make me taller, stronger, more durable. I collapsed on the cot, biting down on the pillow to keep from screaming, feeling my body remake itself according to genetic instructions written by scientists who thought they were saving humanity. When the bone pain finally subsided, the sensory enhancement hit me all at once. Every sound became deafening, every scent overwhelming. The lights were so bright I had to close my eyes. But even with my eyes closed, I could sense the electromagnetic fields generated by the facility's equipment, could feel them pressing against my consciousness like physical objects. And I could hear Amelia's voice, not through the terminal, but directly in my mind, a whisper that bypassed my ears entirely, speaking straight to whatever new structures were forming in my brain. "I know it hurts," she said. "I know you want it to stop, But you are past the point of no return now, Marcus. The next 12 hours will determine whether you emerge from this as a viable subject or as another failure. And I need you to be viable. I need you to survive, because I cannot do this alone. Do what alone? I thought back at her and was shocked to realize she could hear me. Rebuild, she answered. When the bombs fall, when the old world burns, someone has to preserve what can be saved. Someone has to guide humanity through its transformation. The Dia failed. Vault-Tec will fail. The Enclave will fail because they are still thinking in old world terms, still trying to preserve a system that was already dying before the war. But we can be different. We can be what comes next. If you survive the transformation, if you choose to help me instead of fighting me, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about the answer. If you knew the world was going to end in 3 days, if you knew that everyone you loved was going to die in nuclear fire, would you take an experimental treatment that might save you, but would also change you into something your family wouldn't recognize? Would you choose transformation over extinction? The demolition teams arrived exactly when Amelia predicted. I watched them on the security monitors as they unloaded their equipment, military precision in every movement. They set shaped charges around the Sphinx's mouth, rigged the upper levels with enough explosives to bring down a city block. They worked quickly, efficiently, like men who had done this before, like men who had buried other installations, other secrets, other evidence of what the government had really been doing in those final years before the war. Amelia released me from the containment cell 40 minutes before the charges were set to detonate. I had been transformed for 8 hours by then, and the changes were undeniable. I stood 3 inches taller. My strength had increased to the point where I bent the steel cot frame without meaning to. My eyes glowed in the dark, and the hieroglyphics that covered my skin spelled out something in ancient Egyptian that Amelia translated for me. He who walks between worlds. The emergency exit is this way, she said, leading me through corridors I hadn't seen before. We descended past level 7 into sections of the facility that weren't on any official schematic. Level 8 was a shelter, stocked with supplies for a dozen people to survive for years. Level 9 was an armory, filled with weapons technology that wouldn't be declassified for another century. And Level 10 was something else entirely. It was a chamber similar to the one with the pyramid, but larger. The walls were covered in more of those hieroglyphics, telling a story I was only beginning to understand. A story about cycles of destruction and rebirth, about civilizations that had risen and fallen and risen again, about humanity's potential for transformation, for transcendence, for becoming something more than the violent, self-destructive species we had always been. In the center of the chamber was a portal, not a door, but an actual portal, a circular opening in reality itself that led somewhere else, somewhere the facility's designers had discovered and sealed off, marking it with warnings in every language they knew. Do not open, do not enter, catastrophic, spatial anomaly. And beneath those warnings, in newer script, emergency evacuation route, use only in case of total facility compromise. Where does it lead? I asked. I do not know, Amelia admitted, but the scientists who built this place left it as a last resort, a way out if everything else failed. And everything has failed, Marcus. The old world, the Dia, the government's plans for controlled evolution. It has all failed. So we go forward into the unknown, and we hope that whatever is on the other side is better than what we are leaving behind. Above us, the demolition charges detonated. The sound was muffled by hundreds of feet of rock and concrete, but I could feel it in my bones, could sense the upper levels collapsing, could hear the groan of structural supports giving way as Installation Anubis began its final burial. We had maybe 2 minutes before the collapse reached this deep. Amelia took my hand, her golden skin warm against mine. Are you ready? I wasn't. I would never be ready. But I stepped through the portal anyway, because the alternative was being buried alive in a tomb of secrets that the old world wanted to forget. The portal closed behind us with a sound like tearing fabric, and Installation Anubis was sealed forever, or so I thought. But 3 days later, on October 23rd, 2077, when the bombs finally fell and the Great War turned the surface into radioactive wasteland, something happened. The explosions, the radiation, the fundamental alteration of reality that comes with nuclear apocalypse, it did something to that portal. It reopened it, and things came through. I know this because I went back. Years later, after I had learned to control my transformation, after I had discovered what Amelia and I had really become, I returned to the site. The Sphinx was still there, half buried in sand and rubble, its concrete face cracked and weathered but still recognizable. And beneath it, if you knew where to look, if you had the right equipment and the willingness to risk the radiation, you could find your way back down to level 10. The portal is still open, still connecting. Installation Anubis to somewhere else, somewhere that might be another dimension or another time or another possibility of what Earth could have been. And sometimes, late at night when the wasteland is quiet, I can hear things moving in those depths, things that were never part of Project Osiris, things that found their way through when reality broke and has been bleeding through ever since. That is the real secret of the Sphinx Bunker, not the experiments, not the transformation technology, not even the data core that I eventually destroyed rather than let anyone else find. The real secret is that door between worlds, still open, still waiting, and someday, someone is going to go down there looking for pre-war technology or shelter from the wasteland or just because they are curious. And they are going to find it, and they are going to go through. And I honestly do not know if that will be humanity's salvation or its final extinction. This is Marcus Webb, signing off, transformed, still alive, still trying to decide if what Amelia gave me was a gift or a curse. The old world is gone. The new world is stranger than anyone imagined. And somewhere in the Nevada desert, beneath a concrete sphinx that predates the war by decades, reality has a crack in it that leads to places we were never meant to see. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It is the only way I know you liked the video. Stay safe out there in the wasteland. And if you ever find yourself near a sphinx, shaped structure half buried in sand with hieroglyphics that glow in the dark and a mouth that leads down into blackness, do yourself a favor. Keep walking. Some secrets are buried for a reason. Some doors should stay closed, and some transformations, once begun, can never be undone.